was 14 years old. What the hell do you know when you're that young?
She was 14 years old when Ghislaine Maxwell first approached her outside her performing arts high school in Manhattan. She did not know what was happening. She could not have. At 14, she was exactly the kind of girl the Epstein operation was built to find. Ambitious, vulnerable, without a strong home support system, looking for someone to tell her she had a future worth believing in. Jennifer Araoz has told her story publicly. She went on the Today Show, she has spoken in interviews, she has sat through the Maxwell trial and the years of legal proceedings that followed. And she is still breaking down, still processing, still working through what it means to have been trafficked as a child by one of the most protected men in America. This is her story, told through her own words and verified court records, and it is more than most people have actually stopped to hear. Jennifer was walking home from her high school near Rockefeller Center in 2001 when a woman she did not know approached her and struck up a conversation. That woman was Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell had a methodology that has since been documented in trial testimony from multiple victims. She identified girls who fit a specific profile: young, driven, without strong adult supervision at home, looking for validation from older, powerful figures. She would engage them, learn about their lives, find their soft spots, and position herself as proof that a woman like them could make something of herself. Jennifer has described that first conversation as warm and attentive. Maxwell seemed genuinely interested in her. She asked questions, she listened, she made Jennifer feel seen in a way that mattered to a teenage girl who was still figuring out who she was. The grooming was careful and deliberate. Maxwell began with conversation, then moved to invitations. Jennifer was told about a man named Jeffrey Epstein, a philanthropist, a man who cared about supporting young talent, someone who could open doors. She was told he had heard wonderful things about her, that he wanted to help. The first visit to Epstein's Upper East Side townhouse came weeks later. Jennifer has described what she found there: wine in the kitchen, money placed in her hand, an older man who told her that her future was bright and that he wanted to be part of helping her build it. The attention felt genuine. The environment felt sophisticated. She was 14, and she believed what she was being told, because she had no framework yet to understand what was actually happening to her. That is the architecture of grooming. It begins with warmth, with trust, with the deliberate construction of a relationship that the adult controls entirely while making the child feel chosen and safe. What came next, Jennifer has testified, was assault. During visits to the Manhattan townhouse, Epstein began touching her without her consent. She told him to stop. She has said clearly in interviews that she told him to stop and that he did not. He had no intention of stopping. She was terrified. She was a child. The visits continued because the grooming had done its work. Jennifer had been isolated from her peers and her normal school routine. She had been made to feel that this world, Epstein's world, was a world she had been chosen to enter. Leaving felt complicated in ways that are hard to explain from the outside, but that victim advocates and trauma researchers consistently describe as a defining feature of trafficking situations. The control is psychological before it is ever physical. At some point, Jennifer was transported to Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, known as Little St. James. What happened there, she has described as worse than what happened in Manhattan. On the island, there was nowhere to go. There were no witnesses accessible to her. There was no way to call for help. The isolation was absolute. Multiple perpetrators were involved in the abuse she experienced there. She has spoken about being brought to spaces on the island and about the fear she carried through every moment. The full scope of what happened on that island has continued to emerge through the legal proceedings against Maxwell and through the testimony of multiple victims. Epstein's operation had a pipeline that moved girls from initial contact through the grooming process in New York, and ultimately to the island where the abuse was both escalated and protected by the remoteness of the location. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in December 2021 on 5 federal counts, including sex trafficking of a minor and conspiracy. The trial established through victim testimony and documented evidence that Maxwell was not a passive participant in Epstein's crimes. She was an active architect. She identified victims, she groomed them, she was present during abuse, and she facilitated the movement of girls through the network. Without Maxwell, prosecutors argued, the operation could not have functioned at the scale it did. Jennifer came forward publicly in 2019 on the Today Show. She has spoken about the decade she spent not telling anyone what happened to her. She blamed herself. She was scared. She did not know who would believe her or who was connected to the people who had done this to her. That silence and the guilt she has carried for it is something she has addressed directly in interviews. "If I wasn't afraid to come forward sooner," she has said, "then maybe he wouldn't have done it to other girls. I feel really guilty to this day." That guilt is something professionals who work with trafficking survivors consistently identify as a central feature of the recovery process. The structural nature of trafficking, the way it uses psychological manipulation, isolation, and the appearance of consent to maintain control, means that survivors often internalize responsibility for what was done to them. The guilt is not evidence of wrongdoing by the survivor. It is evidence of how effectively the grooming worked. What Jennifer is confronting now, years after she first came forward, is the full scale of what was done to her. Not just the individual acts of abuse, but the system that made them possible. The fact that the people who trafficked her operated with near total impunity for years. The fact that Epstein died in federal custody in August 2019 before he could stand trial on the federal sex trafficking charges filed against him. The fact that accountability, when it finally came partially and painfully, and never in a way that felt proportionate to what was taken from so many girls. Epstein's operation reached across 2 decades and multiple countries. The number of victims identified through legal proceedings runs into the dozens. The actual number of girls who pass through the network is almost certainly higher. The structural reality of large-scale trafficking operations is that most victims never come forward, and most perpetrators are never charged. Jennifer came forward anyway. She has continued to speak publicly, even when it means reliving experiences that caused serious and lasting psychological harm. She developed anxiety, depression, and panic attacks in the years after what happened to her. She carried what had been done to her alone for more than a decade before she was able to tell her mother, then her close friends, then the public. Her testimony contributed to the legal record that helped convict Maxwell. Her decision to go public on national television, knowing she would face scrutiny and skepticism, was part of what made the broader accountability possible. She has described continuing to process what happened as an ongoing experience rather than something that ended when the verdict came down. That is the honest reality of what trafficking does to a person. It does not end when the perpetrators are convicted. It lives in the body and the memory of the person who survived it. The healing, when it comes slowly and incompletely, and differently for every person who has been through it. Jennifer Araoz was 14 years old when Ghislaine Maxwell approached her on a Manhattan sidewalk. She was looking for a future. She found Jeffrey Epstein's network instead. And the woman who recruited her is now in federal prison for helping build and operate the system that abused her. That is what accountability looks like in this case. And it is still not enough to give back what was taken. If you or someone you know has been affected by trafficking or sexual exploitation, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-888-373-7888. You can also text HELP to 233733. Calls and texts are confidential. This is a sensitive topic, and Jennifer Araoz's story is her own. If you are personally processing something similar, please consider reaching out to a trusted person or a professional resource who can offer support.